Okay, let's do Playday number 7 predictions for Stage 3 of the 2021 season of the NAL. Today is October 6, 2021, which is the day of the games. They'll be going on in a few hours, so hopefully you see this a little bit before the games. Normally I do this the day before, but I had something to upload yesterday, so I'm doing this today. Right, let's look at the standings before we look at the games. So there's a current tie in first place between Sonic's, Space Station, and Oxygen. It's technically not a tie because there are head-to-heads, but in terms of points, it is a tie. And it's possible that it stays this way because all three of these teams play. None of them have a bye anymore because they all three already had their byes, and none of them are playing each other today, and none of them will play each other again until the very last play day because Sonics have already played SSG and SSG have already played Auction. That leaves Sonics versus Auction on the very last play day. So this three-way tie could persist through today and the next play day, and up until the very end of the season. Might not be decided till the last day, which would be quite exciting, but we'll see if it happens. And then there's also this tie at 5th, 6th, 7th among Dark Zero, Beast Coast, Mirage. They all have 6 points, but Dark Zero's played 4 games, Beast Coast has played 5 games, Mirage has played 6 games. So there are more points on the table for Dark Zero than for Beast Coast than for Mirage. Okay, and I guess let's just get into the games at this point. We have Sonics versus TSM, Dark Zero versus Space Station, Astralis versus Beast Coast, and Auction versus Xset. This means that it is Mirage today that has the bye. Okay, the first 2 games look pretty exciting. There is, as I have mentioned in several past videos, a sort of disparity between the top 5 teams and then the bottom 4 teams at this moment in the league. It's not entirely clear that that's the proper place to put the divide because that puts, let's look at the standings, right? The top 5 teams here, Sonics, Space Station, Oxygen, TSM, Dark Zero, and then we're saying the bottom 4 teams are Beast Coast, Mirage, Xset, and Astralis. But drawing that divide there feels somewhat arbitrary because the divide is drawn between 5th and 6th, but they have the same number of points. Again, Dark Zero has 3 more points possible in the season, but generally, going back for quite a long time, these are the strongest teams in the league, with the exception of Sonics, which have sort of recently risen to the top. But going back quite a ways, yeah, it was sort of Space Station, TSM, Auction, and Dark Zero, the big 4 of NA for the longest time. And throughout the year, we've seen this season, the 21 season, we've seen Sonics rise to prominence, and then Astralis did pretty well in past stages rather, but not this one so much. And Mirage did pretty well in the first stage, and Beast Coast and Xset have continuously struggled, so they're sort of remained at the bottom. And the disparity was more between the rest of the league and those two, but now it does seem like it's sort of these bottom 4. These teams have struggled to beat the top 4 teams, except for Xset, curiously, which have beaten both Dark Zero and Sonics. But besides that, I don't think this stage any of the other 3 teams had defeated any of these teams. So, right, that doesn't come into play too much for the first 2 games because they are all from the top echelon, but that's sort of why I brought it up, right? TSM versus Sonics to start with. So Sonics took it over TSM in stage 1. It was a very close game, 15 rounds, and then in the next stage, TSM Sonics was a 7-4 scoreline, so TSM won it fairly handily. Not the biggest rubbing or anything, but 7-4 is about as in the middle as it gets. 7-5 means it went all the regulation rounds. Any more than that, it was overtime. Any less than this, and you're winning by like 4 rounds. But win by 3 rounds, there's some implications to it. Sure, but this was a Chalet game, I think. Not 100% on that. I think it was, though. So, right, who looks better this stage? Clearly, it's Sonics. They have only lost to Xset in a, surprise result. And TSM have lost to, Dark Zero and who else did they lose to, actually? I'm failing to remember. Oh, they lost to Auction and they lost to SSG. So they've only been losing to good teams, but, Sonics has been beating good teams. They beat SSG and they beat Dark Zero. And I suppose they still have to play, again, TSM today and then Auction later. But for the time being, it does look like Sonics is the stronger team. TSM has been struggling a little bit. Maybe this is the week that they turn that around, and maybe this is the week that the Sonics don't look as good. It's possible. I mean, they did lose to TSM last stage, and had they beat TSM or even took it to overtime, they would have been above them in the standings, I believe, because I think they ended on the same number of points at the end of the stage, which put Sonics in 3rd and TSM in 2nd. And I believe TSM also had the better round differential, but again, head to head. supersedes that anyways. So, right, I'm going to go with Sonics for this one. And then next up, we have Dark Zero versus Space Station. Another very good game. And if we look at this little chart thing, there are only a handful of teams that can change the teams they've beaten throughout the 3 stages of the NAL. Dark Zero is the one team that Space Station have not beaten yet, and this is their last chance. If Dark Zero beats Space Station here, that means they beat them all 3 times that they played each other within the league. So, who's going to win? Currently, it looks like Space Station's much better, having only lost to the Sonics, another top tier team. I mean, I suppose I said you could do that top 5 versus bottom 4 divide, but then probably by way of points and other factors as well, you could say that the current top 3 at this particular moment in time is, in fact, the 3 teams that are on top: Sonics, Space Station, Oxygen, putting Dark Zero and TSM slightly below them for the time being. So, and just by that power ranking sort of thing, that puts Space Station beating Dark Zero, and I do think that's what's going to happen. I'm going to go with Space Station. You know, hate to see them lose 3 times in a row, right? And it's especially contentious this game, possibly, or maybe it'll all be in good fun and whatnot, but I think there's probably some amount of animosity going on. Hot and Cold and Skies, not very long ago, were on Dark Zero, and Canadian, who is now on Dark Zero, was, of course, very recently on Space Station. So they've had a little bit of a swap. They swapped, again, as I said, Skies and Hot and Cold effectively for Canadian. And then, of course, the like Dark Zero looks a little bit different as well from what they did not too long ago. But anyways, they had this sort of switch of players, so there's that aesthetic going on, or perhaps that's not the right word, but you get the idea. Besides this, Dark Zero have looked noticeably weaker than SSG, especially on their attacks. Dark Zero's attacks have looked really, really bad, and their defenses look pretty good, you know, not terrible, and well, actually, you know, obviously not terrible because they look fairly strong. But again, big struggles on attack, and you cannot struggle that hard in 50% of the rounds and still hope to beat a team as good as Space Station, who are very solid on their attacks and very solid on their defenses. So, yeah, exciting game. This is probably the game of the day to look out for. Maybe Sonic CSM will be more exciting. It could be either of these, but those are my predictions for those 2. And then moving down, perhaps it's more obvious, but with recent events, maybe not as obvious as it would have been several weeks ago. Beast Coast versus Astralis is the next game. Looking at the Stage 1 results and the Stage 2 results, Astralis were just a far better team than Beast Coast. In the first stage, Astralis and again, Disrupt Gaming at the time, they ended, 4th place, and Beast Coast was 8th place, and then Stage 2, Astralis was 5th place to Beast Coast 9th place. So in both stages, they were 4 whole places ahead of them. And Beast Coast did beat them in the first stage, though, which is a bit curious. That was a weird stage when they were Disrupt. They were beating teams that it seemed like they should not be beating based on the teams they were losing to, and vice versa. They shouldn't have been losing to the teams that they were losing to based on the teams they were beating. Very weird stage for them, but it ended up, well enough. I guess they got into the top 4. Not that it sent them to a major, but they did. And then last stage, 7-2 against Beast Coast. You know, fairly standard beatdown as Beast Coast was accustomed to in that stage, as was Xset, but we'll get to that in a moment. Yeah, who is going to win this? Beast Coast is currently on the 2 wins, right? Yeah, they're 2 and 3, where Astralis is 1 and 5. I mean, they have 2 more losses and 1 fewer win, which is not great. Do I keep predicting Astralis against these other bottom tier teams, even though it looks like they cannot beat them at the time? They have to boss up at some point, or they will be relegated, and it needs to happen very soon. If you look at their schedule, of course, they only have 2 games left. This Beast Coast game, and then a bye, and then a Dark Zero game, who they might be able to beat, might not. But it seems like Beast Coast should be the one that is easier for them to beat compared to the other game. So, I mean, they have to have a fire lit under their asses at this point. Like, they were a good team in the last 2 stages. Like, they would have qualified for the major in Stage 1 if there had been a major. They barely missed out on the major. That actually happened in Stage 2. And now, I mean, they're not going to the major, but now they're trying to get out of relegation spot. And then I think there's also a potential for going to SI. So there is a large amount of incentive to do very well in their final 2 games. And hopefully that is apparent to them. I'm sure it's apparent to them, but will it be enough to get them to look past, move past, play past their past struggles, you know, what's been going on this stage. Like, this does not look like the same team from the previous 2 stages. I hope that it will be enough. I'm going to go with them. If they don't win this, well, I mean, you know, Beast Coast, maybe they're major bound if they can really boss up versus these 2 teams. But of all the lower tier teams, Beast Coast has struggled the most against the good teams. Like, they got, you know, of course, popped by TSM, popped by Auction. Not absolutely popped by Sonics, but yeah, pretty much. So, right. Oh, yeah, no. One more thing about it I did want to mention. Another reason that I want to predict Astralis here. If you look at their performances against the other teams that they both played, Astralis does better in every case except for against Mirage, I think. So, right, who have they both played? Sonics versus Astralis played Sonics and Beast Coast played Sonics. It was the same result in terms of scoreline. Have they both played Space Station? No. Have they both played Oxygen? Yes. Astralis got 4 rounds. Beast Coast got 1 round. So that's 1 point for Astralis in that regard. They both played TSM, and Astralis got 5 rounds to Beast Coast's 1 round, so a lot better there. They have not both played Dark Zero. This is Beast Coast, and then they both played X set, right? So, and I'll go back to Mirage in 1 second. Beast Coast got 4 rounds. Astralis got... Oh, wait. Ooh, got me looking foolish. Okay, so not in every regard except for Mirage. Astralis did actually get 1 more round against X set, so there is that as well. I did miss that. And then versus Mirage, Beast Coast, and this is the only case where one of the 2 beat a team that the other team lost on. Mirage beat Astralis 7-3, and Beast Coast beat Mirage 7-2, which is a pretty noticeable change around. So that might be indicative of Beast Coast winning against Astralis here, but man, it feels hard to vote for Beast Coast ever, right? Sad to say. Astralis, as I've said previously, seem like a much better team than they've been playing. They proved that they were a better team in the past stages, and they're just struggling because of the pressure, because of the new org, because of some other unknown factor. I don't know. But I'm going to go with Astralis because if ever there was a time for these guys to win a game, it would be right now. So I'll go with them. I could look a bit foolish with this one, but we'll see. Auction versus Xset. Auction is one of 2 teams, I believe, that has not yet lost to Xset or Beast Coast, along with Space Station. If you look here, Beast Coast have beat these teams, Xset has beat these teams, and there was no SSG or Oxygen in either of them. And with the, you know, those 2 teams' performances, it's slightly embarrassing to lose to them, but I mean, they're, you know, with best of ones, any team can theoretically beat any team on any day, so you don't feel too bad about losing a best of 1. If it was best of 3s, might be a little bit different. But okay, Auction has not faltered, and they look even in the stage that they struggled, stage 2. They beat Xset, and curiously, they beat them a lot better than in the stage that Auction was the number 1 team. So, do I think Xset upsets Auction? That's really the question here, right? Because disregarding that, there's no reason to pick Xset except for like you like them or you just want an upset or whatever. But Xset has beaten 2 good teams thus far, and for some reason not beat the bad teams. Well, you know, quote unquote bad, but worse teams than the other teams. They beat Dark Zero and they beat Sonics. So they beat maybe, as you could call it, a mid-tier team. Again, these are all like somewhat arbitrary. These are all very good teams, obviously, but in relation to each other. They beat Dark Zero and then they beat Sonics, who are currently at the top. So can they beat Oxygen? They need to beat Oxygen, TSM, Space Station, some amount of them, to avoid relegation if Astralis win one of their games. If Astralis don't win anything, then yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, they don't actually need points. But they would like to get more points. I mean, it's more money, it's more SI points. I don't think they can go to SI, but if for nothing else, they want the peace of mind that they will not have to fight for their spot in the NAL next year. They don't want to be in the relegation spot. But, you know, you could vote for the upset, and it might happen. We'll see. But I mean, the smart vote is for Auction. Given 50-50 odds, you got to pick the better team. Given, you know, non-50-50 odds, if the odds were like 8-2 in favor of Oxygen, then maybe you might vote for Xset because you like those odds. But you know, a betting man would have to go with Oxygen. They've looked not indomitable, but they've looked fairly incredible throughout the stage, and no reason to believe that they'll falter to no major reasons to think that they'll falter to Xset, right? So those are my predictions, and you know, as I do most these days, like, they're fairly standard predictions. Generally, the top tier teams will beat the low tier teams. And then there is some nuance, right? Because of course the top tier teams need to play each other, the low tier teams need to play each other. But you know, it seems fairly decided here, because if you are again looking at the high tier, mid tier, low tier, then it's all high tiers playing against mid tiers, and then I guess this is two low tiers, but this is a high tier versus low tier. Anyways, all of that conjecture of tiers and whatnot aside, that's my predictions for Playday number 7. This ran kind of long, but I don't think I rambled too much about anything that I didn't want to talk about anyways. I might upload another video later talking about Alamau responded to the little video that Caliber Jacob put up about the LATAM League. And if you're curious what he said, you can just go on Twitter and look at it and whatever. I might make a video. I probably will. It's just I don't know if I'll upload it today, tomorrow, or what I'll do. But I do want to talk about it a little bit because it's a little bit interesting, and it does pertain to what I mentioned in yesterday's video. Otherwise, I might not talk about it, but I think probably I will. You know, seems cool to talk about. Seems like people might want to see me talk about it, perhaps. So with all that being said, I'm on, 75 subscribers, which feels nice. It feels cool. If you want to see that number go up as I do, feel free to subscribe. Similarly, feel free to like or comment or whatever, because I guess YouTube, you know, it's got the algorithm running day and night, and perhaps it'll put these videos in the feeds of people who want to see them. So again, with all that being said, I will catch you in the next video.